Craig Donovan stepped forward, finger pointed at him.
No way. Get out. Are you deaf? I said get out. This store doesn't serve people like you.
The man in the gray hoodie stood still.
I just wanted to look at a jacket.
Craig clicked his tongue.
A jacket? You can't even afford a hanger in here, understand?
He stepped closer.
You stink like garbage. You look like you crawled out of a refugee camp. Get your filthy hands off my merchandise before I drag you out.
I'm a customer. That's all.
A customer?
Craig snapped.
Poor, destituted, self-righteous black people. Get out. I'm not selling to you.
The man didn't leave, didn't argue, just stood there. As for the manager, he had no idea what consequences his actions would bring. But before we get to what happened next, you need to understand who this man really is. Because trust me, when you find out, everything Craig just said is going to hit different. His name is Harold Sullivan. He grew up in a single-wide trailer outside Raleigh, North Carolina. No father in the picture, just him, his older sister, and their mother, Lorraine. A woman who cleaned office buildings 6 nights a week and sold sweet potato pies on the weekends to keep the lights on. Harold remembers the smell of bleach on his mother's hands when she tucked him in at night. He remembers eating cereal for dinner 3 days in a row because the paycheck hadn't cleared. He remembers wearing the same pair of sneakers for 2 school years straight until the sole peeled off and he had to duct tape it shut. That kid, the one with the taped-up shoes, is now worth over $600 million. He earned a full scholarship to Howard University, worked 2 campus jobs, graduated top of his class in business, and at 26 years old, he took $12,000 he'd saved, every penny, and opened a tiny menswear boutique in Durham, North Carolina. He called it Apex Collective. Within 5 years, that one small store turned into 10, then 20, then 42 locations across the country. Apex Collective became one of the most respected luxury retail brands in America, known for blending streetwear culture with high-end fashion. Harold's face landed on the cover of Forbes, twice. But here's the thing about Harold that most CEOs would never do. Every single quarter, he picks a store at random. He puts on old clothes, no watch, no jewelry, no entourage. And he walks in like any regular customer off the street. He calls them floor walks. No one knows he's coming. No manager gets a heads up. The only person with him is Tom Archer, his regional operations director, also dressed down, pretending to be a friend tagging along. Why does he do it? Because Harold believes the only way to know the truth about your company is to experience it the way your customers do. Not through reports, not through dashboards, through the front door. He's caught inventory fraud on these walks. He's promoted associates who impressed him. He once shut down an entire store in Dallas and rebuilt the team from scratch after watching a manager ignore a disabled customer for 15 minutes. Harold doesn't play when it comes to how people are treated inside his stores. Today's target? The Charlotte flagship. Apex Collective's largest location, highest revenue, the crown jewel of the brand. Saturday afternoon, the store was alive. Polished concrete floors gleamed under gallery-style track lighting. A DJ in the corner booth spun low neo-soul, the bass humming through the walls just enough to feel it in your chest. The air smelled like cedar and sandalwood from the signature diffusers placed near every entrance. Racks of tailored jackets lined the east wall. Handcrafted leather goods sat under glass near the registers. Everything was curated. Everything had a purpose. Harold had approved every single detail of this floor plan himself. He walked in through the main entrance wearing a plain gray hoodie, faded jeans, and a pair of old sneakers. No logo, no flash, nothing that said money. Tom walked beside him, equally unremarkable. Two guys on a Saturday. That's all anyone would see. Harold picked up a shopping basket, started browsing cashmere knitwear near the front. He touched the fabric, checked the stitching, ran his thumb along the seam, the way someone who actually knows textiles would. And that's when he noticed Craig Donovan, mid-40s, tall, khaki pants a half size too tight, store lanyard swinging from his neck like a badge of honor. Standing behind the concierge counter, scrolling his phone, barely looking up. A young white couple walked by. Craig's head snapped up instantly. Bright smile. "Welcome in, folks. Let me know if I can help you find anything." The couple moved on. Craig went back to his phone. Then he looked up again and saw Harold. The smile vanished. His eyes traveled down. Hoodie, jeans, sneakers. Back up again. And something shifted behind those eyes. Something cold. Something familiar. Harold had seen that look before, 1,000 times, in 1,000 different places. He kept browsing, kept his head down, and waited. He didn't have to wait long. Craig moved fast. He cut across the floor before Harold could even reach the jacket display. "No way! Get out!" His voice was loud. Not just loud enough for Harold to hear, loud enough for the entire floor. 6 customers turned their heads. A woman near the shoe wall froze mid-step. Craig pointed his finger straight at Harold's chest. His voice bounced off the glass displays and polished walls. Everyone on the floor could hear him. He wanted them to. "Are you deaf? I said get out. This store doesn't serve people like you." Harold stood still. His grip tightened on the basket handle, but his face didn't change. "I just wanted to look at a jacket." Craig clicked his tongue and tilted his chin up. "A jacket? You can't even afford a hanger in here, understand?" He took another step forward. Close enough now that Harold could smell the cheap cologne rolling off his collar. Close enough that it wasn't customer service anymore. It was intimidation. "You stink like garbage. You look like you crawled out of a refugee camp. Get your filthy hands off my merchandise before I drag you out." Harold lowered his eyes, not from weakness, from control. He took a slow breath through his nose and said very quietly, "I'm a customer. That's all." "A customer?" Craig's lip curled upward. "Poor, destitute, self-righteous black people who think you're gods. Get out. I'm not selling to you." The words echoed off the concrete and glass. A man near the register looked away. A woman grabbed her daughter's hand and pulled her toward the exit. Nobody said a single word. Harold didn't leave. He set the basket on the nearest display table and looked Craig in the eye. "Can you check if this jacket comes in a large? That's all I'm asking." Craig stared at him like he'd lost his mind. Then he laughed. Not a real laugh, a performance. A loud, theatrical bark aimed at the crowd. "Did you hear that? He wants me to check sizes for him." Craig scanned the floor for approval. Nobody laughed back. "I've been here 10 years. 10 years. I know who buys and who browses. You're not even a browser. You're a liability waiting to happen." That's when Tom Archer stepped in. Tom had been watching from 3 racks away, pretending to examine polo shirts. He walked over calmly, hands in his pockets, and stood beside Harold. "Hey, we're together. Can you help us both?" Craig's eyes moved to Tom. White guy, casual but clean. His posture shifted, just slightly. The hostility didn't vanish, but it softened by a degree. Just enough to notice. Just enough to prove the point. "Your buddy here isn't really our demographic," Craig said. He dropped his voice and leaned toward Tom with a conspiratorial smirk, like they were on the same team. "You know what I mean?" Tom kept his face neutral. "What demographic is that exactly?" Craig shrugged, crossed his arms. "Look, I'm not the bad guy here. Loss prevention flagged a profile, okay? I'm being proactive, doing my job." There was no flagged profile. No loss prevention alert. Nothing in any system. Craig invented it on the spot, and delivered it with the confidence of a man who had done this 100 times and never been challenged. Tom glanced at Harold. Harold gave the smallest shake of his head. "Not yet." Tom turned back. "We'd like to speak to a manager, please." Craig laughed again, shorter this time, sharper. "A manager? Bro, I've been running this floor for a decade. I am the manager. And I'm telling you, your friend needs to leave. Now." From across the floor, someone had been watching every second of this exchange. Denise Caldwell. Mid-30s, black. 4 years at this location. She'd been helping a customer with a return near the back registers when Craig's voice first cut through the music. She heard every word. Her jaw was tight. Her hands gripped the counter edge so hard her knuckles had gone pale. She excused herself from her customer, straightened her lanyard, and walked over. Her heels clicked against the concrete floor, sharp, steady, deliberate. Each step sounded like a decision being made in real time. "Sir, I'd be happy to help you," she said to Harold. Her voice was warm, professional. Then she turned to Craig. "I'll take over from here." Craig stepped sideways to block her path. He physically positioned his body between Denise and Harold, his shoulder squared toward hers like a wall going up. "Denise, stay in your lane. I already told this guy we can't help him." She didn't step back, not an inch. "Craig, you can't refuse service to someone based on how they look. That is not our policy." Craig leaned in closer. His voice dropped low, but not low enough. Everyone within 10 feet heard every syllable. "I'm not refusing service. I'm using judgment. You want to ring this guy up? Fine. And when that jacket comes back in 2 days with the tags ripped off and a fake receipt, that's on your numbers. Be my guest." Denise's nostrils flared. Her eyes glistened under the track lighting. But she held herself together. "That's a disgusting thing to say. You don't know anything about this man." Craig's expression changed. The smirk disappeared. His face went flat, cold, empty. "Keep pushing this, Denise. I'll write you up for insubordination." He paused, let the silence hang like a blade. The track lighting hummed above. Then he added, softly, "Again." That one word, "again," cracked the whole thing open. This wasn't new. Denise had pushed back before, and every single time she did, Craig punished her for it. Write-ups, schedule changes, shifted responsibilities. A pattern so quiet and so consistent that no one above ever noticed. Or maybe they simply never wanted to. Denise's chin trembled. She looked at Harold, and he could see it in her eyes, the deep, worn-out exhaustion of fighting a war that nobody around her acknowledged existed. She stepped back, not because she agreed, because she'd learned what happened when she didn't. Harold watched her walk away. His chest tightened. Not for himself, for her. Craig turned back to Harold with a satisfied grin. The grin of a man who always won, who had never once faced a consequence for any of it. "Now, where were we?" He cracked his neck. "Oh, right. You were leaving." Harold didn't move, didn't blink. Craig's grin faded. He unclipped the radio from his belt, lifted it to his mouth, and pressed the button. "Hey, Brad, got a possible 1040 near menswear. Can you swing by?" 30 seconds later, Officer Bradley Moore appeared from the back hallway. Off-duty cop, weekend security hire. 6'2", broad shoulders, buzz cut. His boots thudded heavy against the concrete. His utility belt creaked with each step. His right hand rested near his holster, not on his weapon, but close enough to send a message that didn't need words. He looked at Harold first, then at Craig, then back at Harold. "Sir, is there a problem here?" Harold's voice stayed calm. "No problem at all. I'm shopping." Craig jumped in before Moore could respond. "He's been handling high-value merchandise and refusing to leave after being asked multiple times. I need him removed from the store." Every single word was a lie. Harold had touched one rack of cashmere. He had never been asked to leave. He'd been attacked from the moment he walked in. He had simply existed. A black man in a hoodie, in a space Craig decided wasn't his. Officer Moore squared his stance toward Harold. Not overtly aggressive, but not neutral either. His body language said everything his mouth hadn't yet. "Sir, I'm going to need to see some ID." Harold looked at him evenly. "Am I being accused of a crime?" Moore hesitated, his tongue pressed against the inside of his cheek. He knew the law. He knew the line. But Craig was already pushing from behind. "Come on, Brad, just walk him out. I don't have time for this." Moore looked at Craig, then back at Harold. The hesitation lasted 3 full seconds. It should have lasted longer. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step outside." The floor had gone completely silent. The DJ's bass line still pulsed through the walls, low and soulful, almost mocking against the heaviness of the moment. A teenage girl near the fitting rooms held her phone up, recording. Her hand trembled. A mother by the entrance gripped her son's shoulders and whispered something in his ear. An older white man in a blazer stood frozen near the sunglasses display, mouth half open. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. And Harold Sullivan, the man who designed this floor, who chose every fabric on every rack, who approved every light fixture, who built this company from $12,000 and a dream, was being told to leave his own store. Harold didn't move. He stood exactly where he was, feet planted, hands at his sides. His breathing was steady. His eyes were clear. He looked at Officer Moore the way you look at someone who is about to make the worst decision of their life. "I haven't stolen anything," Harold said. "I haven't threatened anyone. I'm standing in a store that's open to the public, so I'll ask you again. Am I being accused of a crime?" Moore's jaw tightened. He didn't answer the question. He couldn't, because the answer was no, and they both knew it. The silence that followed was deafening. Two men standing face to face in a luxury store on a Saturday afternoon. One with a badge and a holster, one with a shopping basket and a hoodie. And the only crime committed was the color of one man's skin. Craig stepped forward from behind Moore's shoulder. "Brad, why are we still talking? Just grab him and walk him out. I've got customers to deal with." Moore shifted his weight. He looked uncomfortable, not because he thought Craig was wrong, but because he knew how this looked. Two authority figures cornering a black man who hadn't done anything, in a store full of witnesses, with a teenage girl pointing a phone at them. But he didn't step back. He didn't question Craig. He didn't ask for a second opinion. Instead, he moved closer to Harold and lowered his voice. "Sir, I'm going to give you one more chance. Walk out on your own, or I'll escort you out. Your choice. His tone had shifted. It wasn't a suggestion anymore. It was an ultimatum delivered by a man with a badge who was used to being obeyed without question. Harold looked at him. And if I don't leave? Moore didn't blink. Then we have a different kind of conversation. The threat was quiet, but it was real. Harold could feel it in the air. The shift from suggestion to force. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. The music from the DJ booth felt distant now, like it was playing in another building. Tom Archer stepped forward. His phone was in his hand, camera facing out, recording. For the record, this man has committed no crime. He's asked to shop. He's been refused service, and now he's being threatened with physical removal. I just want to make sure that's all on the record. Craig's head snapped toward the phone. His face twisted. Turn that off. You can't film in here. Store policy. Tom didn't lower the phone. There's no such policy. Craig lunged for the phone. His hand shot out fast, fingers reaching for the screen. Tom pulled back just in time. Moore stepped between them, but he positioned himself facing Harold and Tom, not Craig. The positioning told the whole story. Craig was the accuser. Harold was the accused. And Moore had already chosen a side. Put the phone away, Moore said to Tom, or I'll confiscate it. On what grounds? Tom asked. Moore didn't answer. He just stared. The teenage girl near the fitting rooms kept recording. Her friend whispered to her, Are you getting this? She nodded without looking away from the screen. Craig had regained his composure. He straightened his lanyard, tugged at the bottom of his shirt, and turned back toward the customers on the floor. He raised his voice, not to Harold this time, but to the crowd, to his audience. Folks, I apologize for the disruption. This is exactly what I deal with every single weekend. People come in here dressed like that. He gestured at Harold without looking at him. Touch everything, buy nothing, and half the time merchandise goes missing. I'm done being polite about it. Somebody has to say what everyone's thinking. He paused, scanning the room, expecting nods, expecting agreement, expecting the silent majority to back him up the way they always had. Nobody agreed. Not a single head moved. A woman near the candle display shook her head and walked toward the exit. She didn't look back. The older man in the blazer spoke up from across the floor. Hey, this doesn't seem right. Craig didn't even look at him. Sir, please, I'm handling a security matter. Stay out of it. The man went quiet. Not because he agreed, but because he didn't know what else to do. He looked around the floor for backup. Nobody met his eyes. That silence, that bystander silence, was louder than anything Craig had said. It filled the room like smoke. Craig turned back to Harold, stepped close. Too close. Harold could see the veins in Craig's neck. He could smell the stale coffee on his breath. You want to prove me wrong? Craig said. Then buy something, right now. Pull out a card and pay for that jacket. Show me you belong here. Harold's voice was low, steady. I don't need to prove anything to you. Craig smirked. That's what I thought. He turned to Moore. Brad, we're done here. Walk him out. Moore reached for Harold's arm. Harold looked down at Moore's hand, hovering just above his elbow. He didn't pull away. He didn't flinch. He just said, calmly, I wouldn't do that. Moore hesitated. His fingers curled, then dropped. But Craig wasn't done. He grabbed the shopping basket off the display table, grabbed it hard with both hands, and shoved it sideways toward the return rack. The basket swung through the air and clipped Harold's hand. The edge of the plastic caught his knuckles. Not hard enough to break skin, but hard enough to sting. hard enough to leave a red mark across the back of his hand, hard enough to constitute unwanted physical contact in front of a dozen witnesses. The sound of the basket hitting the rack echoed across the silent floor. Every head turned. Harold looked at his hand, then at Craig. His expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes shifted. Something ancient and patient and absolutely certain. Tom stepped forward. "You just put your hands on him." Craig rolled his eyes. "I moved a basket. Relax." "You made physical contact. That's assault." Craig laughed, short, dismissive. "Assault? Please. You people love that word. Everything's assault. Everything's racism. Maybe if you spent less time crying victim and more time earning your place, you wouldn't have these problems." You people. There it was again. The teenage girl recording whispered to her friend, "Oh my God, this is so messed up." The store had emptied by a third. Customers were leaving, not because they were asked to, but because they couldn't stand to watch anymore. The cedar scent from the diffusers still hung in the air, but it smelled wrong now. Sweet over something rotten. Craig stepped back. He looked satisfied, victorious even. He adjusted his collar and nodded to himself like a man who had just taken out the trash. Then he looked at Harold one final time and delivered the line that would end his career. "You know what your problem is?" Craig said. He tilted his head. His voice dropped to something almost conversational, the way someone talks when they believe, truly believe, that they are right. Some people in this world build things, and some people take things. That's just how it is. That's nature. And I can tell which one you are just by looking at you." The words landed like a slap across the face of every person in that room. Not a whisper. Not a murmur. Just the ugly, naked sound of a man who believed what he was saying with every fiber of his being. Officer Moore looked at the floor. Even he couldn't hold eye contact after that. His hand dropped from his belt. His shoulders sagged by an inch. A woman near the door put her hand over her mouth. The old man in the blazer closed his eyes and shook his head slowly. Somewhere near the back, Denise Caldwell stood with her arms wrapped around herself, tears running silently down her cheeks. Harold stood perfectly still. The silence stretched. 5 seconds. 10. Then he reached into his hoodie pocket, more tensed. His hand went back to his belt. His fingers wrapped around the holster strap. Craig flinched and took a half step backward. Instinct overriding arrogance for the first time all afternoon. Harold pulled out his phone. Just his phone. He unlocked it with his thumb, tapped a number, and brought it to his ear. When the other end picked up, he said 5 words. Calm, flat, final. "Send the team in now." Craig let out a nervous laugh. "What team? Your boys from the parking lot? Go ahead, call whoever you want. We've got real security here." Harold didn't respond. He set the phone on the counter, screen facing up, and folded his hands in front of him. And waited. He didn't look angry. He didn't look hurt. He looked like a man who had seen everything he needed to see and had already decided exactly what was going to happen next. Craig was still smirking, still confident, still puffing his chest, still standing in the middle of a floor he thought he owned. He had no idea that the next 90 seconds were about to dismantle his entire life. 90 seconds. That's all it took. The front doors of the store swung open. Not casually, with purpose. 3 people walked in wearing tailored business suits. Their shoes hit the concrete in unison, sharp and clean, like a drum roll before the verdict. One carried a leather portfolio. Another had a tablet open. The third wore a lanyard. Apex Collective, corporate headquarters. Craig saw them first. His smirk flickered. He straightened his back and adjusted his lanyard, the way a soldier adjusts his uniform when a general walks in. "Can I help you folks?" he said. His voice had changed, softer now, careful. The arrogance was still there, but it was hiding behind something new. Uncertainty. Tom Archer didn't give him a chance to settle. He straightened up, dropped the casual act completely. The man who had been browsing polo shirts 10 minutes ago suddenly looked like exactly what he was. A corporate executive who had just watched an employee destroy himself in real time. Rachel, Vince, Sheila. He addressed each by name. "Thanks for coming. We have a situation." Craig's mouth opened. His eyes bounced between Tom and the corporate team like a man watching a car accident in slow motion. "Wait," Craig said. You work here?" Tom reached into his back pocket and pulled out a wallet. He flipped it open and held up an ID badge. The Apex Collective logo, his photo, his title. Tom Archer, Regional Operations Director. Craig's face went white. Not pale. White. The blood drained from his cheeks like someone had pulled a plug. His lips parted, but nothing came out. His eyes drifted, slowly, inevitably, toward Harold. Harold hadn't moved. He was still standing in the same spot. Same hoodie, same sneakers, same calm expression he'd worn through every insult, every threat, every humiliation Craig had thrown at him. But now Harold reached into the front pocket of his hoodie, slowly, deliberately, like a man who had been waiting for this exact second since the moment he walked through the door. He pulled out an ID badge. The corporate team shifted, a subtle repositioning. The way people instinctively move when someone important is about to speak. Harold held the badge up, eye level, steady hand. The badge said everything. Harold Sullivan, founder and CEO. The silence that followed wasn't just quiet. It was absolute. It was the sound of Craig Donovan's entire world collapsing in on itself. His photo was on the wall. Right there, behind the register, mounted in a brushed aluminum frame next to the company's mission statement. Harold Sullivan, founder. The face Craig had walked past every single shift for 3 years without ever once actually seeing. Craig looked at the badge, then at the wall, then back at Harold. His mouth moved. No sound came out. Harold spoke, and when he did, his voice was different. Not louder, not angrier, just final. The voice of a man who owned the room, the building, the brand, and every paycheck of every person standing in it. Craig Donovan, employee number ending in 54, hired in 2016. 3 customer complaints for discriminatory conduct, all flagged in the system, not one of them acted on. He paused. Let each word settle like a stone dropped in still water. That ends today. Craig's knees buckled. Not all the way, but enough. His hand shot to the counter behind him. His lanyard swung against his chest. The same lanyard he'd worn like a crown all afternoon now looked like a noose. "Mr. Sullivan, sir, this is a misunderstanding. I was just following protocol." There is no protocol at Apex Collective that tells you to refuse service based on the color of someone's skin. Harold's voice cut through the stammering like a blade. "I know that for a fact, because I wrote every protocol this company has." Harold turned to Officer Moore. Moore had taken 2 full steps backward. His hands were off his belt. His shoulders were caved in. He was staring at the floor like it might open up and swallow him. "And you," Harold said. "You were about to physically remove me from my own store, based on zero evidence and one man's prejudice. We'll be having a very different conversation about your contract with this location." Moore said nothing. He couldn't even look up. The teenage girl near the fitting rooms lowered her phone for the first time. Her eyes were wide. Her mouth hung open. She turned to her friend and whispered 3 words. "Oh my God." Her video was already uploading. The older man in the blazer, the one who had tried to speak up and been shut down, stood near the door with his arms crossed. He nodded once, slowly. The nod of a man who had just watched the universe correct itself. And Denise Caldwell. She stood at the far end of the floor, one hand pressed over her mouth, the other gripping the edge of a display table. Tears streamed down her face, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of pure relief. Years of complaints, years of being silenced, years of watching Craig do this to customer after customer while the system looked the other way. Someone had finally seen it. Someone with the power to actually do something about it. And he had seen it with his own eyes. Harold didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Every word he spoke carried the weight of a man who had built an empire and had just watched one of his own employees spit on everything it stood for. He turned to the corporate team. "Craig Donovan is terminated, effective immediately. Not suspended, not reassigned. Terminated." Craig's legs almost gave out. He grabbed the edge of the counter with both hands. His knuckles went white. "Mr. Sullivan, please. 10 years. I've given this store 10 years of my life." Harold looked at him. No anger, no satisfaction, just clarity. 10 years, Harold repeated. "And in those 10 years, how many customers who looked like me did you turn away when nobody was watching?" Silence. "You don't have an answer, because you never kept count, because it never mattered to you." He nodded to Vince from corporate. "Collect his badge, collect his keys, and walk him out through the same door he tried to push me through." Craig's hands trembled as he unclipped his lanyard. The badge he'd worn like armor for a decade now dangled from his shaking fingers like a dead thing. Vince took it without a word. Craig looked around the floor, at the customers, the corporate team, the teenage girl whose phone had captured everything. He was searching for one sympathetic face, one ally. There were none. Vince walked him to the front door. The glass closed behind him. Afternoon sunlight caught his silhouette for a moment. A man standing on the sidewalk, blinking, like someone who had just woken up inside his own nightmare. Harold turned to Officer Moore. Moore hadn't moved. He stood near the back wall with his arms crossed tightly, not in defiance, but in self-protection. The posture of a man trying to make himself smaller. "Officer Moore," Harold said, "your private security contract with Apex Collective is terminated, effective right now." Moore uncrossed his arms. "Sir, I was just responding to what the employee told me. I was doing my job. I didn't know." "You didn't ask," Harold said. "That's the problem. You heard one man's accusation, you looked at my skin, and you made your decision. You didn't investigate. You didn't question. You didn't even hesitate." Moore's mouth tightened. His eyes dropped back to the floor. "The footage from every camera in this store, and there are 14 of them, will be forwarded to your precinct commander and the Civilian Oversight Board by Monday morning. What happens after that is between you and them." Moore said nothing. He turned and disappeared through the staff exit. His boots echoed, heavy, slow. the sound of a man walking away from a career he'd just destroyed. The store was still. The music had stopped. Nobody remembered when. The DJ had killed the sound without being asked. Harold stood in the middle of his own floor. He took a breath. Then he walked toward Denise Caldwell. She was standing near the back display wall. Her eyes were red. Her hands were shaking. She looked like a woman who had spent years screaming into a void and had just heard her own echo come back. "Denise Caldwell," Harold said. His voice was different now, softer, warmer. The voice of a man speaking not as a CEO, but as someone who understood. "You tried to help me today when it would have cost you everything. You filed complaints, 3 of them over 2 years. I found every single one in the system, each one buried, each one ignored." Denise pressed her lips together. A tear slid down her cheek. "That's over," Harold said. "Starting Monday, you're the floor manager of this location. Full promotion, full raise, direct reporting line to regional operations." Denise's hand went to her chest. Her breath caught. She tried to speak but couldn't. So she just nodded, pressing her fingers against her collarbone like she was trying to hold her heart inside her body. Harold extended his hand. She took it and held it with both of hers. "You showed me the kind of person I want representing this company," he said. "Thank you." From somewhere near the front of the store, a customer started clapping. Softly at first. Then another joined. Then another. It wasn't a standing ovation. It was something quieter than that. Something that felt less like applause and more like exhaling. Like an entire room letting go of something it had been holding too tightly for too long. The video hit the internet that evening. The teenage girl, her name was Abby Simmons, 17 years old, senior at Myers Park High School, uploaded the footage to her social media page at 6:14 p.m. She didn't add commentary. She didn't need to. The video spoke for itself. 4 minutes and 38 seconds of Craig Donovan refusing service, hurling insults, and physically shoving a basket into the hand of the man who built the company he worked for. By midnight, it had 2 million views. By the next morning, 14 million. The hashtags moved fast. They trended nationally within hours. News outlets picked it up before the sun rose on Sunday. The footage played on morning shows across every major network. Anchors narrating the clip frame by frame, pausing on Craig's face, zooming in on Harold's badge. Headlines landed heavy. Every major outlet framed it the same way. An employee who refused to serve the CEO of his own company because of the color of his skin. Commentators called it a textbook case of retail discrimination. Civil rights organizations issued public statements within hours. Social media exploded with personal stories from people who had experienced the exact same thing. In clothing stores, in car dealerships, in restaurants, across the country. The video became a mirror. And millions of people saw their own reflection in it. Apex Collective's public relations team released a statement that afternoon, drafted with Harold's direct input. It didn't deflect. It didn't minimize. It acknowledged what happened, named it for what it was, and laid out specific steps the company was taking in response. It thanked the customer who recorded the incident. It thanked Denise Caldwell by name for her courage on the floor. And then Harold did something most CEOs would never do. He ordered a full internal audit. Every store, all 42 locations, every discrimination complaint filed in the last 3 years, pulled, reviewed, and examined by an outside civil rights consultancy. The findings were absolutely devastating. 38 complaints across the chain. Fewer than half had been investigated. 0 had resulted in any form of discipline. The reports sat in HR inboxes like dead letters, filed, forgotten, and functionally erased. Harold fired 2 regional HR managers who had buried the worst of them. Not reassigned, not put on leave, fired. He made the terminations public through an internal company memo that was later leaked to the press. And he didn't try to stop the leak. He then instituted a new company-wide policy. Any discrimination complaint filed at any Apex Collective location would trigger an automatic corporate-level review within 48 hours. No store manager could dismiss it. No HR rep could bury it. The complaint would go straight to a dedicated oversight team that reported directly to the CEO's office. Harold also partnered with the National Civil Rights Organization to redesign the company's training program from scratch. New onboarding modules, quarterly evaluations, secret shopper audits specifically designed to test how associates treated customers of different races, genders, and appearances. It was the most aggressive reform in the company's history. And Harold made sure every employee in every store knew exactly why it was happening. The legal consequences came next. Harold's legal team filed a civil lawsuit against Craig Donovan, citing assault for the basket incident and violations of North Carolina's public accommodation anti-discrimination statutes. Craig hired a budget attorney from a strip mall office in East Charlotte. His defense was simple. He claimed he was following loss prevention instincts and that his actions were based on behavioral profiling, not race. The surveillance footage destroyed that argument in under 10 minutes. 4 camera angles captured the entire incident. They showed Craig ignoring white customers who exhibited the same browsing behavior he'd used to justify targeting Harold. One camera caught a white man in gym shorts handling 6 different items, setting them down, and walking out without buying anything. Craig hadn't said a word to him, hadn't even looked at him. But the worst part of Craig's defense wasn't the footage. It was his own phone. During discovery, Craig's text messages to coworkers were subpoenaed. The messages contained racial slurs, jokes about black customers, a running group chat where Craig and 2 other associates ranked customers by race and predicted who would steal. One message, sent 3 weeks before the incident, read, "Another one just walked in wearing a hoodie, taking bets on how long before something goes missing." The messages were read into the court record during Craig's deposition. His attorney objected 4 times. The judge overruled each one. Judge Catherine West ruled against Craig on every count. She called his behavior a sustained campaign of racial hostility disguised as customer service. He was ordered to pay damages. He was issued a permanent restraining order barring him from all Apex Collective properties nationwide. And he was sentenced to 200 hours of community service with a civil rights advocacy organization. An organization that served the same communities Craig had spent years degrading. Craig left the courthouse without speaking to reporters. His photo ran on the front page of the Charlotte Observer the next morning. He didn't look arrogant anymore. He looked hollowed out. Like a man who had finally been forced to see himself the way the rest of the world had always seen him. Officer Bradley Moore's consequences came separately, but they hit just as hard. After receiving the store's surveillance footage, Moore's precinct opened an internal affairs investigation. The review uncovered 2 prior complaints from citizens, both black men, who alleged that Moore had used his off-duty security position to intimidate and remove them from retail locations without legal cause. In both cases, the complaints had been dismissed as unsubstantiated. But with the Apex Collective footage now public, the precinct couldn't look away anymore. Moore was suspended without pay, pending the full investigation. His private security license was revoked by the state licensing board. The police union issued a short, carefully worded statement that stopped just short of defending him. The Civilian Oversight Board issued a much stronger one. citing a clear pattern of racially motivated conduct unbecoming of a sworn officer. 3 weeks after the suspension, Moore submitted his resignation. No press conference, no public statement. Just a single one-paragraph letter delivered to the precinct commander's desk on a Tuesday morning. He never wore a badge again. Not once. The system that had protected Craig for a decade, the same system that had buried Denise's complaints, ignored the warning signs, and allowed discrimination to fester like an open wound, had finally been cracked open. Not by a lawsuit, not by a protest, but by a man in a hoodie who walked into his own store and refused to leave. 3 months later, the Charlotte flagship looked the same from the outside. Same glass doors, same brushed aluminum signage, same cedar scent drifting through the entrance the moment you walked in. But inside, everything was different. Harold Sullivan stood on the sales floor on a Saturday afternoon. This time he wore a tailored navy suit and handmade Italian leather shoes. No disguise, no undercover mission. Just a man visiting a store that now reflected the values he'd built the company on. Denise Caldwell met him at the door. She wore a new lanyard, floor manager, and a smile that hadn't been there 3 months ago. The kind of smile that only shows up when a person has been seen, heard, and believed after years of being ignored. They didn't hug. They didn't need to. They exchanged a look, a single nod that carried the weight of everything they'd been through in this building. Harold walked the floor slowly. He stopped at the menswear section. The same rack, the same leather jacket. He pulled it off the hanger, checked the size, large, and carried it to the register. He bought it, put it on right there in the store, wore it out the front door. He passed the spot where Craig blocked his path. The spot where Moore asked for his ID. The spot where the teenage girl held up her phone. The floor was the same. The lighting was the same. But the air was different now. Lighter, cleaner. Like a room that had finally been opened after years of being sealed shut. Sales at the Charlotte location were up 22% since the incident. Not because of the scandal, but because of the response. Customers trusted the brand more now, not less. They'd seen a company face its ugliest moment in public and choose accountability over denial. Denise was featured in a national retail industry publication, a 2-page profile titled, "The Associate Who Refused to Stay Silent." She spoke about the years of filing complaints that went nowhere, about the fear of retaliation, about the moment she saw Harold hold up that badge and realized that someone had finally been listening. Abby Simmons, the 17-year-old who recorded the video, received a full scholarship from the newly created Apex Collective Foundation. Harold announced it personally at a company town hall. He told the crowd that Abby didn't just record a video. She held up a mirror. And sometimes that's all it takes. Apex Collective's reformed training program was adopted by 2 other national retail chains within 6 months. Harold was invited to speak at a congressional hearing on retail discrimination. And Craig Donovan, he was spotted working at a warehouse distribution center on the outskirts of Charlotte, loading boxes onto pallets. Alone. No lanyard, no audience, no power over anyone. No one recorded him. No one cared. So here's the question I want to leave you with. The systems that allowed Craig to behave like that for 10 years are not accidents. They are choices. Every complaint that gets buried is a choice. Every manager who looks away is a choice. Every bystander who stays quiet is a choice. Justice doesn't show up on its own. It shows up because somebody, a Denise, a girl with a phone, a leader willing to tear his own company apart, decides that silence is no longer an option. Have you ever witnessed something like this? In a store, at work, Anywhere in your life and stayed silent? Or did you speak up? And if you didn't, what would it take for you to do it next time? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. If this story hit you somewhere real, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you're not subscribed yet, you already know what to do. Take care of each other. I'll see you in the next one.
Prejudice chưa? Bấm nha. Here's what I can't stop thinking about. The way you treat people when you think they have nothing. That's who you are. Not when you know they are important. Not when there's something in it for you. When you think they are nobody. When you think nobody is watching. That moment, that's your truth. And you can't take it back. And let's stop pretending prejudice is just one person's problem. It's not. It lives because people around it let it live. Every time someone sees something wrong and stays quiet, that's the accident. Every time a complaint gets ignored, that's permission. The person do harm is guilty, but the people who watch it happen and do nothing, they are the reason it keeps going. But here's what gives me hope. Courage is contagious. When one person stands up, it gives the next person permission to stand up too. You don't have to be the loudest voice in the room. You just have to be the first one. After that, others follow. They always do. So tell me, have you ever been treated like you were invisible? Like you didn't matter? Or have you watched it happen to someone else? What did you do? Drop it in the comments. If this one hit you, share it, like it, subscribe so you are here for the next one. Because the way you treat the people you think can't do anything for you, that is your character. Everything else is just performance.